Welcome to the Dawn to Dusk podcast with your host, Douglas Wood, author of From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. In each episode, Doug speaks with distinguished legal professionals who have mastered the intricacies of building a successful law practice and then transitioning to retirement or other fulfilling pursuits when the right time comes. Now, let's join Doug for today's insightful discussion.
Welcome to the Dawn to Dusk podcast. I'm your host, Doug Wood. Today's guest is Ann Parnes, the co-founder of After Hello, a national matchmaking and date coaching firm that helps high-achieving professionals build intentional, lasting relationships. Ann spent 14 years practicing law, including 7 as an assistant district attorney in Gretna, Louisiana, right across the river from New Orleans and her alma mater, Tulane University. It was in a high-stakes, pressure legal environment, working with conflict, motivation, and human behavior, that Ann began to realize what most captivated her wasn't simply the law itself, but the people behind it, their choices, their stories, and their emotional forces that shape decision-making. That insight planted a seed. In 2014, while still practicing law, Ann became a certified life coach, drawn by a growing passion for personal development and human connection. 3 years later, she made a leap that few lawyers are willing to take. She left the courtroom behind and launched what is now After Hello. What began as a boutique matchmaking service has since grown into a nationally recognized brand, known for its high-touch, deeply personal approach. Today, Ann blends her legal training, coaching expertise, and deep understanding of human behavior to help accomplished professionals approach love in the same way they approach clarity, purpose, and intentionality in their careers. In our conversation today, we'll explore Ann's remarkable journey, from the precision and pressure of a legal career to the vulnerability and fulfillment of helping others create lasting partnerships. We'll talk about reinvention, trusting intuition, now the skills from one chapter in life can become the foundation of the next. Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was a mouthful.
It was easy to do in the sense that your accomplishments are, I have a lot of folks on this show, as you can imagine, who have gone into second careers that are really fascinating. Yours is particularly fascinating to me because it's so different in that sense. But another one was became a stand-up comic. Another became a poet in poetry reading, and I mean some of the topics that the other second careers are really very fascinating. So I found your story really interesting. But let's go back sort of to the beginning. You spent 14 years practicing law, including 7 as an assistant district attorney, where you're dealing with really intense and emotional environment, which I know is very difficult to deal with at times. So what initially drew you to that kind of work, to become a lawyer in the first place?
I think that I've always valued justice and fairness, and also really helping people, and people in general have always been of interest to me. And so I think that when you're that age, there are only a few paths that you're really aware of: doctor, lawyer, engineer, things like that. And that one seemed to make sense because it was sort of the alignment of two, and that's kind of what I went in thinking that was going to be my path.
So, where'd you go to college?
Tulane.
Oh, you did both law and you said.
Tulane undergrad, and then I went to American for law school up in
Oh,
DC.
so I had the wrong one on your on law school. So down in Washington D.C., right?
That's right.
American.
Mhm.
Okay, so you went from that crazy place down to even crazier New Orleans, back home.
Exactly. Crazy in a better way, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely better way. I love
Yeah.
New Orleans. It's one of my favorite places. So you talk about how you're fascinated by the motivation and the emotional backing that people have in their choices. Did that curiosity and that commitment to that reflect your legal work? Did you apply that in your legal work, and how?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, just I think my favorite part in getting ready for cases was interviewing witnesses and getting their stories, and, just kind of even an internship I did before I became a lawyer. I remember it was part of the capital defense program, and I was in a small rural town in Mississippi where Parchman was, and going to visit those witnesses in places that I never would have been able to see under normal circumstances, and just getting people's different life experiences. To me, that was fascinating. I didn't go into law thinking I would be a prosecutor. I just knew that I just had a general idea. And in DC, I worked for the federal government, not as a prosecutor capacity, but as a trial lawyer for the Department of Agriculture. And then when I wanted to move back to New Orleans to move home, it was just something that seemed really fascinating for some reason. I think everyone kind of thinks, the criminal arena, there's something about it, maybe not everyone, but the idea of being a part of justice that was appealing to me. Maybe a little different than it would turned out to be, but that was sort of when I started to look into that realm. But certainly just curiosity for what other people's life experiences look like, what leads them to the courtroom. I think that was definitely a big part of it.
So take the listeners and the viewers through the process. At some point, I don't know, was it the 10th year, the 11th, 12th, whatever year it was, your mind started to focus and say, maybe there's something else. When did that start? How did that percolate? What made you sort of not necessarily decide the day you launched Hello, but in terms of the process you mentally went through to make that leap?
Sure. I really enjoyed being an assistant DA. I went to juvenile court initially just to train, and then I fell in love with being there. It was more rehabilitative, which was just more in sync with who I am. So I was there for a long time, and at first it just felt like, wow, I'm really, making a difference here. And not to say that I wasn't, but I think after a while, as an empath, it becomes really difficult to leave that behind. We also did abuse and neglect cases on Tuesdays that were, would tear me up, and I had my own young children, and I just felt like I felt depleted at the end of the day. And just I think as you get older, you become a little bit more curious about, what else could there be, because I just this is does not seem to be working for me anymore. And so just started exploring, really getting in touch with what do I love about what do I do and what isn't sitting well with me, and just asking the right questions to myself and taking the time. And I had a friend who was a life coach. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even known that that was a thing back then. So I spoke with her about it, and I was like, that's exactly what I would love to do. Is to support people in kind of situations like this or any other romantic situations, whatever times you come to terms with the fact that, you don't know everything, and life is a journey. And so you're ready for something more. So at that point, I enrolled while I was still working in the DA's office and got a life coaching certification focusing on relationships. And that was just kind of a starting point. That's what I thought would be the next iteration for me.
So tell us a little bit more about that process of becoming a certified life coach.
So there are numerous programs. I wanted to choose one that was, even though there aren't certifications necessary like they are for being a lawyer, but there's the International Coach Federation. So I wanted to pick a program that would have certified me for that. There were, gosh, I had to take lots of online classes, and then, lots of practices and things like that. Um, you know, After being a lawyer and studying for the bar and all of that, I can't say it was in person. Plus, it was just very personally interesting to me. So it didn't really feel like it was at work, but it was certainly something I could do. I went part-time that last year in the DA's office and just oversaw both juvenile and adult drug court. Um, so I had plenty of time to raise young children, get my coaching certification, and work. So it's definitely possible to do.
So you had three jobs at that time.
Correct. Still lots of fun. So
Yeah, it's lots of fun.
always,
So you had kind of made the decision that you were going to take this big leap forward when you founded and launched After Hello. How did that idea take shape? And what gave you the confidence, which is amazing here, the confidence to go from a successful, established, secure legal job into some entrepreneurial venture that who knew what would happen?
I mean, if I'm being honest, and I always would like to be, I did have, I was married and had the support of a spouse, right? So also I worked for the government, which we know it's not like I was leaving a, high six-figure salary. And so, we had the conversation of, I think that I can build this business. At that point, it was just coaching. And, is this something that we can handle? And the answer was yes. So I did have that cushion and that safety net to do that. So yes, it was a leap to give up, something that obviously had invested a lot of time and money and energy into, but it wasn't as big of, taking out loans or anything like that initially or at all.
So how did it evolve from basic coaching into After Hello?
I had lots of single clients, and while we were doing the work, mo a lot of my brain was occupied thinking, what a great catch this person is. Who do I know? And I just couldn't hardly resist thinking about who I might know to set them up with, but realizing that I was constrained by what they were there for, and that was, stay in my lane, as my boss at the DA's office used to tell me. And then I just began to think, well, what if I made this my lane? People are struggling. There's nobody in New Orleans doing this. So at that point, I started to get really curious and picked up the phone and called a bunch of matchmakers around the country, picked their brains, figured out what the strengths were that I would need, what life looked like, what it all looked like being an adult at this point. I was 40, and or maybe a little younger. But anyway, just kind of one step at a time. Started it here in New Orleans locally. I remember my first client was a woman who I played tennis with, and just, your reputation definitely helps in that way. And then grew it naturally, organically by myself with a little bit of course, help along the way for 6 years as matchmade in NOLA, and then 20. I interviewed a woman for a client of mine. I had been considering hiring a partner or finding a partner, but everyone who I met with had the exact same strengths that I did, which I didn't need another one of me. What I needed is somebody who could handle the other side of the business if I wanted to scale and grow, which I did. So I met Maria Murray as I was interviewing her for a match. She was definitely not a match for the client, but when I was listening to what she did for other businesses, I was like, this is what I need. So that conversation began of, what would partnership look like? And so we're going on our third year together where we rebranded and expanded, from Matchmade and Nola, which is so local, to After Hello. And now we have a network of matchmakers and dating coaches who work for us around the country that we're really excited about, the next chapters and all of that.
So in your materials, you talk about, your focus is professionals who are
Yes.
in this transition period of where they are. Having in my career, I managed hundreds of lawyers over the years, and I don't think those kinds of professionals are much different than others. Their egos are usually out of control. They think that they can handle anything that comes before them. It's the only way they can really survive in many ways in the environment in which when they work. So, what what are some of the challenges you face when you're dealing with people who kind of think they've figured everything out? Yeah, but they haven't figured out their love life or their personal relationships. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think, it's asking them questions and having them think through the answers themselves. Um, Lawyers are really good at making arguments and making a case. And so I think one of the things that my clients have struggled with is seeing another narrative for the story they tell themselves, because they start to build it and they create it. So I've worked with them to think about, now argue the other side, use the skills that you've been taught, right? What could the other side be? What could another explanation be? Sort of giving the benefit of the doubt. What would their case be? And so I think that's really helpful to lawyers. Also reframing what success looks like in a relationship rather than the courtroom, right? Winning an argument is not going to win you in the relationship and in love and in life. So reframing what success looks like and maybe having them kind of understand what their natural impulses might be or triggers, or um, in their professional life, and how they might check for them. I think lawyers are definitely coachable, and as long as they're open to growth. I've not had an issue, but really just helping them build self-awareness about how, what patterns they might be falling into. The other thing that sometimes we work on is giving yourself some separation between when you are finished with your work and when you're entering your relationships, whether friends or romantic, and just getting into a completely different energy. Because otherwise, I think if you're coming in with that kind of energy, it's going to prevent them from getting deep with somebody and really having any softness. And so building those relationships, so that's really valuable. Um, but really, ultimately, with anyone, they have to be open to growth, and that means reflecting on themselves and the part that they play. It can't always be somebody else who's at fault. It has to be a little bit of reflection in terms of, where they might be able to make the difference in what's happening in their life.
Okay, in a way, it reminds me of when I ran a law firm and all that kind of good stuff, and I was always business focused in terms of classic business models to build business. And I used to go through the old SWOT analysis with the lawyers in the office: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And I always found the lawyers were really easy with their strengths. They could list them for pages and pages. But if I asked them their weaknesses, they would look at me as if I had two heads. Like, what do you mean my weaknesses? And to draw that out of somebody is really the only way in building my business over the years was that's where the real opportunities were. There were obvious opportunities from strengths, but I would focus on the weaknesses and say, listen, there's an opportunity here for you to build on that weakness and make it into a strength, whatever, whatever I would say. Do you find it hard to draw the weaknesses out of people, or is that important in your approach to things?
I definitely think it's important to take a look at yourself and identify, and it's not even, I don't like victim mindset. So I think that what happens is if a lot of people are thinking to themselves, this keeps happening to me, it really gives away their power. And so just to have them understand how much control they have and what's happening to them and how they're contributing actually puts them in a position of strength and ownership and control and positivity. So I think that they are opportunities to understand, what part of what's happening to them they're creating so that they can get into the driver's seat and steer it in a different direction.
You hit on something that strikes home for me, in that when I analyze and talk to lawyers who are looking at the end of their careers and moving on, I often say to them, listen, you were totally organized and focused in what you did for your clients. Now do it for yourself, because it's a transition that they have a great deal of difficulty doing, and being, honest enough with themselves to make an honest assessment and move on with and find, a new path. So that's it's like it's a matchmaking, only it's a matchmaking with yourself in the way when I'm dealing with my, the clients I work with.
Like
You talk,
doctors, the worst patients, right? We know what to do, but
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
ourselves, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, it's the old that the adage that the shoemaker has bad shoes,
Yes.
whatever that one is.
Right.
Anyway, so in reading your materials, you talk about intentional matchmaking. That's a buzzword that you use in your approach to things. So what does that mean, and how does that differ from today's sort of swipe left, swipe right world that seems to be dominating the relationship category?
Right. So unfortunately, we don't have a magic wand, right? And so somebody can come in with just a million things that they would like to have in a partner, 100 things. And what we want to do is really get clear around what are the most fundamentally important ones to them, which ones are the ones that if they don't check this particular box or whatever, or they're deal breakers, is it's not going to work long term because these are needs that they have, not just would like to have, but needs that without which, there's no burying your head in the sand for too long. They're going to arise and the relationship won't have long-term potential. So to us, it's let's get really clear on, what are the values that are so fundamental to you? If there's no alignment there on the other side, it's not going to work. What is your life vision and like which part is, whether it's family goals or just how you want to live your life that is not just something that would like to have, but this is like the need for you of what a good life looks like. Let's get clear on those. And then also we say vibes, vision, values, vibes. But that's just more energy of people, that you like spending time with. If this is someone who you're going to be spending the majority of your free time with, it has to be someone who you just feel, um, uh, their energy matches yours, their lifestyle matches yours. You're not going to put somebody who wants to be out till all hours of the night talking to everyone in the bar with somebody who is intellectual and wants to, read and watch news and things like that. So vibe is what we sort of call it. Um, and also, what are your needs and what are again, what are the things that you would like to have? We want to consider your wants, of course, and we think it's important, but we want to be so clear that we don't introduce you to someone who doesn't make sense, where maybe you have that chemistry that we're all seeking, right? But if you think about times in your life where you have found that, chemistry very quickly, that probably hasn't worked out for you. And so we want to avoid doing that again. We want to be intentional about um, being honest and curious with ourselves to figure out really what are our non-negotiables and must-haves so that we can focus on that and then let the rest develop. And it's also about, so not wasting time. And of course, we're different from swiping because we're talking about the whole human. Before we bring anyone to our client, we have already had that conversation with them to make sure that there is the alignment in the necessary areas for our client. And then we're going to introduce them if we see that. And if there's chemistry there, that's wonderful. We're going to help them build that if they'd like to. If it's not, then great. No pressure. It's just an opportunity to meet somebody new and have a conversation and maybe learn a little something more about yourself and, what works and what doesn't.
I just this is kind of a crazy question, but it just came to my mind. Have you ever had a client come in and you basically, when you're done with them, you say, "Sorry, I can't do anything for you"?
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna be a pretty rough moment for that person.
Well, we would be delicate, but
I'm kidding. I'm
I
kidding.
mean, again, we don't have a magic wand, and if someone's expectations are what we consider beyond our abilities, whether it's reasonable or unreasonable, is, subjective, then we'll say that we're not a good fit.
So let me leave from that because I wish I would fly in a wall during that conversation. That would be fun. Anyway,
Uh,
so as looking back on when you were a lawyer and what you saw as success there, what fulfilled you there, what really mattered in your life when you were a lawyer, a successful lawyer, and now you look at what the same kinds of emotional values that you get out of After Hello, are they similar, different? How would you look back on them?
I guess somewhat different because, right, success practicing law means winning. Luckily, we got to screen our own cases in the DA's office, so I wouldn't take a case that I didn't feel strongly about. And if I discovered something in the midst of the preparation that made me think it was not an appropriate case, of course, we wouldn't bring it. So that was wonderful. So winning to me did feel like justice and what was right. Um, Winning now is creating someone's love story, introducing them to someone who's going to completely change their world. So of course it's much nicer to live in a world where love is something that you're creating. So love to me is more important than justice, I guess is what I figured out.
Okay. That's a good. I love that. Love is more important than justice. That's a perfect motto because it's so truthful. So what's next for After Hello?
Well, we'd like to keep growing and seeing how many more people we can help. We want to definitely stay small in terms of, well, it's not small, but personalized, right? So we are not overloading our matchmakers with tons and tons of clients. They really have deep personal relationship with their clients. They can get the feedback after every match where they can talk in between and see what's working, what's not working, how they're feeling, checking in. We want to keep it at that level, but really continue to grow our networks to make it easier for our matchmakers. Of course, we consider ourselves almost like a recruitment firm. We're not just stuck to our databases, though we have a large database. Because of Maria's background in recruitment and operations, we feel like we can help clients almost everywhere based on our systems of finding eligible professional singles. So we just want to keep helping people and growing at a steady pace that we can keep the same quality.
And so where do you have at this point? Where are your locations, and how do you ensure a national reach?
We have clients in New York and California, but right now we're mostly focusing on Arizona through Florida, Atlanta, and Chicago. But again, we do have large networks in New York and California now that we have clients there. And also we're part of a international organization of professional matchmakers. And believe it or not, we go to conferences together. We just got back from a cruise in November where we learn from each other and collaborate on matches. So really, if your matchmaker is in that network, we help each other with matches and incentivize each other to sort of look through each other's databases to help find matches. So that's a
Yeah,
great asset to all of us.
that's an interesting observation you make there. This is sort of off topic somewhat, but when I was practicing law, I was a advertising and marketing lawyer was the area that I specialized in. And the competition with other firms is intense. I mean, it's like you had to watch how many knives you had in your back on any given day from the other law firms trying to take business away from everything else. So I was talking to a client one day, and they asked me if I knew an advertising lawyer in Singapore, and I didn't know an advertising lawyer in Singapore. So he said, find one. So I found one, and that gave me the idea of building a network like this network that you are involved in of lawyers all over the world who specialize in my case, advertising and marketing law, in your case, matchmaking. And it built into over 100 countries over the course of the time. And the interaction and the support that we all gave one another was phenomenal in terms of building all of our practices to the point where my competitors in the United States were all clamoring to become members and saying, please, let me be a member, let me be a member. And I brought some of them in because they were not these guys who are going to stab you in the back. We kept the ones who are going to stab you in the back out. But it's amazing how there's a first concept, particularly lawyers think that this is all about competition. It's all about taking the other guy's client away or winning the case or whatever it is. In fact, it's really a relationship business, and get along with your competitors as opposed to want to kill them. So I find, that the fact that you found fulfillment in that kind of a structure to be analogous to just about any business. That you get together with your competitors. Who was it? I think it was Machiavelli. Make your enemy your friend, or whatever it is. So that's not such bad advice. It's not bad.
No, and I mean, it really doesn't have to be that way, right? I think
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and most of I think people who are in our industry are people who really value connection and community. And so when we get together, it's a wonderful time for us. And it's a lot about relationship building because we have to trust each other, like you said, to say, you know, can you please look in your network and see who you can find for my client? I'm going to do the same for you and all the financial pieces that go with that. So I
Yeah,
think it's
sure.
wonderful.
Oh, no, that's an interesting reflection that I had there. Okay, so um, picture out there the lawyer who's in the middle of their career, toward the end of their career. They're confused. They don't know what they're going to do next. They know that they really don't have that passion for the law anymore at that point in their lives. What advice would you give them?
Definitely take some time to think it through. I would, throw all the spaghetti at the wall. There's no idea that it's a bad idea at this point. I always say, and this is from a coaching perspective too, what is your best case scenario? Like if you could do anything, let's forget about all the practical reasons why maybe you can't. Let's take that out of the realm there and just brainstorm like what would you love to do and see where that leads you, at least as a starting point. Think about what you really have enjoyed about your career, about what are you naturally drawn to in terms of what are you reading? What areas are those that resonate with you that really capture your passion and your interest? And just start big from there. And then you can get to the why nots, but maybe there aren't any. I would also say get a career coach. This is something we know there's value in expertise. And so there are some really wonderful coaches out there who can help you through that. And if you're a lawyer, you can probably invest in yourself a little bit for this next chapter. I think that a lot of us go through this, and again, there aren't that many paths that we knew about, or as we learn about ourselves, right? There's no reason that we can't shift and turn. You're not committed forever, so I feel like explore that to the fullest. Invest your time and invest some resources, and dream big, and then see what happens.
I love that. It says start high, and
Yeah.
then you'll wherever you end up, it'll at least be starting from the right beginning point.
Yeah, we have more power and control than we think, and that's
Yeah.
the only way that people get to places is sort of dreaming big and then taking that first step. And you might not get there overnight, but at least chart that path, right? And start to take the steps. I mean, everything you were reading about me, I'm like, oh God, right, that really did happen. But I didn't foresee this, but if you just start somewhere and get the information and it feels aligned at every step, then eventually you're going to get to where you want to be.
One of the in the early days of Apple, when Steve Jobs ran Apple, they did the very famous ad campaigns over the years. Well, there was one in particular that struck me, where it had visuals of Einstein and great artists and great inventors or whatever, and the tagline was "The dreamers make the difference." That was the tagline, and I drew from that. I said, that's what you ought to always start with: being a dreamer. Because if your dreams don't come true, some of them will, not all of them will, but some of them will. But if you don't dream, none of them do. So, it's that kind of thing. I imagine that's possibly true in the world of matchmaking. If you don't dream of your ideal partner, you're never going to find your ideal partner. So I'm no doubt that you find them for lots of people. So how do people get in touch with you?
They can go to our website, afterhello.com. They can email me, Ann, at afterhello.com. Any of those be great. And we do have a complimentary private registry. So if anyone wants to throw their name in, if we have a client we're working with and it sounds like it could be a promising match, then we'll call and interview and do all that, make it really easy. And that's free. So
Perfect. Free. There's nothing better than free.
yeah,
Maybe. You get what you pay for, right?
I was gonna
Okay.
say,
And
but
and thank you so much for being on. I mean, this is, like I said, your career is fascinating to me, and it's very enlightening and very, it's kind of the thing that I think a lot of our viewers and listeners need to hear, how someone can make that transition and have a fulfilled life, even beyond what they had, even though the law was fulfilling for them as well. So it's a great lesson for all of my viewers and listeners. So thank you again, and enjoy New Orleans. It's one of my favorite cities in the world, and I'll be back there someday and knock on your door and whatever.
I love that. Thank you. And I hope this is helpful.
Okay, it is. It's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on the Dawn to Dusk podcast. You can learn more on building and transitioning a multi-million-dollar law practice in Doug's book, From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. If you're interested in working with Doug, suggesting future guests, or have questions you'd like Doug to ask guests in upcoming episodes, reach out to him at douglas.wood@wood.law or visit his website at dawntodusk.wood.law. And if you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your peers. Until next time, we appreciate your viewership.